כי אני בן של מלך ורק אתה אחד מולך.
Time, mankind used stories to explain some of the most complex ideas that they wanted to convey. More recently, we have the stories of the great Hasidic masters, Baal Shem Tov and his students, and these stories generally are stories about a certain great tzaddik, sage, and a certain situation they were in, and actual events that had occurred with very wondrous and beautiful lessons. The Baal Shem Tov had a great grandson. His name was Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and Rabbi Nachman began a whole new venue, a whole new style of teaching, of giving over Hasidic stories. When Rabbi Nachman was teaching his students, he realized that many of his students were having a hard time grasping some of the lessons and ideas he was trying to teach them. And he thought about it and he realized, he said, from now on I'm going to start telling stories. And he called them stories of long ago. These stories didn't necessarily actually happen. And they're not the same as a typical Hasidic story. When you look at Rabbi Nachman's stories, they're much, much deeper. However, they could be understood by anyone on any level. From a child understanding it as a beautiful story with a few nice lessons in it, to someone with vast knowledge who can read it and see wondrous concepts in there and beautiful ideas. When Rabbi Nachman started teaching like that, he saw that the stories have a power to do something that mere words cannot. Stories can convey concepts without actually verbalizing them, by giving a situation and an example of certain surroundings. And to illustrate an example for one of Rabbi Nachman's stories, I'm going to give you today the story of the humble king. There was once a king who had a minister, a wise man. And the king called over his wise man and he told him, you know, there's a king who signs himself as mighty warrior, great man, and man of truth and a humble king. The fact that he's a mighty warrior or a great man, that I know. Because, how do I know that? The king's land is almost completely surrounded by sea. And over there, it's the city itself is fortified with walls, and in sea they have battleships loaded with cannons. Anyone even tries to get near, forget about it. However, on the other side, there is land, and there's only one narrow trail in order to get that one can go to get to the city, and that trail is surrounded by sandbogs. So only one person at a time can cross by quick sandbogs. And at the end of the trail, there are cannons that even if someone tries to go through that trail to enter the city and they come to attack, the cannons are loaded and ready for any surprise attack. So the fact that he's a mighty warrior, that I know. However, the king hides himself always behind a veil. And I have portraits of all kings. And that king, I do not have his portrait. So the fact that he's a humble man and a man of truth, that I do not know. So the king asked the wise man, I would like you to go and fetch me a portrait of that king. And the wise man went, took some money, and got to the city. And in the city, he saw that the city was full of corruption. People were cheating each other, robbing each other blind, and the court systems were corrupt. If one person got cheated, they'd go to court and they would bribe the judges, and even if a person did bribe the judge, the next day he forgot him already and you had to bribe him again, and everyone was very, very corrupt. And the minister also realized that you could tell a lot about a land, the essence of their culture and who they are, through their humor. And he said their humor was a very nasty kind of humor, like a hurtful humor. And they would joke about the corruption in the land and how everyone is cheating each other. And Rabbi Nachman kind of stops the story and he says that there's a land that includes within it all other lands. And there's in that land a city that includes within it all other cities in that land. And within that city there's a house that includes within it all other houses in that city. And within that house there is a man who includes within him all other people in that house. There stands a person who makes all the humor for that city. And it continues the story, and he says that the wise man decided to get into a business venture with a certain person, and he allowed himself to get cheated. And he took the case to court, and he saw all the judges were lying and being bribed, and he appealed his case to a higher court, and same thing happened. And he went so on until he got to the Senate, and even in the Senate, full of bribes, full of lying, full of cheating, no truth whatsoever. So he appealed his case until he finally got to the king. He stands there in front of the king, and he starts to say, "Your Majesty should know your land is full of bribery, of deceit, corruption." All the ministers are standing around, they're seeing him, they're getting very angry, they're getting ready to pounce on him. "What are you doing?" telling the king, or pointing out our flaws in front of the king. And he said that it would be fitting, it would be logical to say that the king should be exactly the same as the rest of the land that he is leading. And the king, meanwhile, hearing this, is turning his ear towards a curtain to hear who's that person who's recognizing all of this. But the wise man stops and he says, "But now I know why you're hiding yourself behind a veil. Because you are not like them, because you're trying to distance yourself from that deceit and corruption." And he starts praising the king with wondrous praise, how amazing the king is, and how unbelievable he is. Right? The Talmud says that in a place of a humble person's greatness, that's where you find his humility. And as he would go on and praise the king, because he was so humble, he became more and more and more humble until he felt like he was nothing. And he couldn't take it anymore, he just threw the curtain away. And at that moment, the wise man was able to see the king and take a portrait of him to bring it back to his king. So what does this story mean? The king, in the beginning, the first king, is our higher intellect, the part of our mind and our soul that is yearning and searching for God at all times, searching and yearning for spirituality. The wise man is the lower part of our intellect, a part of our more physical part that is more connected and in this world, that is going around and doing business and is living in this world. And our higher intellect, in its quest for God, asks the lower intellect to go and fetch him a portrait of the king, because we know all cultures, you know that culture is like that and that culture like that. Like the king had portrait of all different kings, but he yearned to get a glimpse of the truth of God. We know that God is mighty. We could see it around us. It's obvious. You look at this wondrous world, the universe, unbelievable things happening around us, miracles every day. The fact that we're breathing and moving, it's unbelievable. But that he's a man of truth, and he's a humble king. How do we know that? We want a glimpse. The higher intellect is yearning for a glimpse, a portrait, to keep him strong and to remind him of what the king is really about. And he sends us it sends our bodies and our lower intellect through this world to search for it. Now Rabbi Nachman goes on and tells how inaccessible the place where the king is. It's so far and almost impossible to reach. But then he goes on and he says, the wise man got there. How did the wise man get there to that city if he was just told us a second ago how inaccessible it is? So that's why he stops and he gives us a whole aside about there's a land that includes all other land, and a city. What is he talking about? What's a land that includes all other land? All other lands? Eretz Israel. Eretz Israel includes within it all the lands in the world, Chazal say. And a city that includes all other cities, Yerushalayim. And the house that includes all other houses, Beit HaMikdash. And the man who includes all other people and all the things in that house, that's the Kohen Gadol or the Tzaddik, which are very similar concepts. But then he says that there's the man who makes all humor, and that land is also in the house, right? So I'll get to that in a second. But first, Rabbi Nachman is telling us that the way to find Hashem is to go to the place where the sanctity is in this world. That Hashem had made a place where He's accessible in this world. Through Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim, Beit HaMikdash, and through His tzaddikim. That through tzaddikim, Hashem, even though He seems so unattainable and so distant, He gives us a way to reach Him in this world. Through the true tzaddikim. But who is that other man in the house who makes all humor? If we see the humor in that land is so disgusting. Nachman teaches us that you go to Yerushalayim and what do you see? You have amazing Talmidei Chachamim, tzaddikim sitting down learning, but yet a few blocks away you have all the most disgusting things in the world, like the worst parts of the Manhattan. All kind of filth and horrifying things. And you would stand there in Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalayim, in the holiest of places, and you would look and you'd say, how can it be? How could it be that there's so much filth? How could it be so disgusting? And Nachman says, why do Chazal teach us? Chazal teach us, where is the entrance to Gan Eden? By the entrance to Yerushalayim. And the entrance to Gehenom, where is it? Also by the entrance to Yerushalayim. That a place of great sanctity, of great potential, of where you can get close to God. That very place is a place of great danger, where the evil one himself is lurking there and waiting to make people stumble. But if a wise man looks closely, he recognizes that's why God is so hidden in this world. That's why it's so hard to find Him. He hides Himself behind a veil because He wants to be removed from this disgustingness. And he searches and he looks at the truth that exists there. And he looks at the beauty that exists there. And he starts praising God and praying to God and saying, God, it would seem to be logical to say that your world is so full of corruption. Your holy land is so full of deceit and corruption and all kind of disgusting things. God forbid, fitting to say that you are like that, but it's not. We know you're not like that. How do we know you're not like that? Because that's why you're hiding yourself. That's why it's so hard to find you, because you allow yourself to be found by those who seek you in truth. And we start praising God and in seeing the beauty that He has in the world. If we focus on the positive, we focus on the good, we start talking to Him until He reveals to us a little glimpse of Himself, and we take that portrait of a little glimpse that we get of God, and we bring it back to our higher intellect to keep us strong spiritually, to get that little feeling of that little uplifted feeling that we get sometimes when we pray with true sincerity and really praise God, and we take it with us till the next time that we need it again. Nachman is teaching us in this story alone, and that's just a very basic explanation of the story. There are much deeper secrets in there as well. Nachman teaches us, though, in this story alone, for someone who's in a very basic level, he teaches us how to pray to God, how to discern between falsehood and truth. He teaches us our true purpose in this world of searching to God, and even though God seems so unattainable, that we can all find Him if we search for Him in the right places, and we can separate between the deceit and the falsehood to the truth. May we merit to truly see God's beauty in this world and separate and remove from us all the husks, all the falsehood that surrounds us. And may we merit to get a glimpse of that portrait of the beauty of God, and may it uplift us and keep us strong forever. Him with us always, because through these stories it's as though we have already, through Tzaddik, Rabbi Nachman of Breslau, we have already a glimpse of the beauty of God. So let's learn more. Let's read these stories and try to understand the lessons that are hidden, the beautiful gems that are hidden within Rabbi Nachman's holy stories. Become as though our entire essence is like our higher intellect who searches and yearns to be close to God.
يعني بنسى الماء